Hello, welcome to Industrialization Part 4. We are going to finish our industrialization lectures with this video. Woo! So you should be turned to your guided notes page. The first thing that we are going to talk about today, or right now, is labor unions and violence that happen as a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. So, really quick overview about what are labor unions. A labor union is an organized group of workers formed to protect their rights. So it's important to know this term specifically, labor union. This is a key term. Now, these labor unions were created because of those terrible working conditions, low pay, and child labor that were very frequent in factories during the Industrial Revolution. So, on one side here, I have issues that workers were facing, and on the other side, I have some solutions that the labor unions fought for during this time period. So an issue is low pay, less than $500 a week are coming in, and the labor union solution was to create a minimum wage, higher pay. People were working long hours, up to 12 hours a day, and oftentimes it was 6 to 7 days a week. So they really pushed to have 8-hour work days, and they're the reason that we have 8-hour work days today. Oftentimes people were not given any sick days or vacation days, so obviously that's something that they were interested in. Working conditions were really bad, which we've talked about numerous times, but I have a weird statistic here. About 675 people a week were dying in factories due to these unsafe conditions. So these unions were interested in having safer working conditions, safer working environments, and then lastly, they wanted to end child labor. So two major unions that you'll be responsible for knowing about are the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. The Knights of Labor were established before the AFL, and they welcomed anyone, which is really cool for an organization of this time period. So women were allowed, African Americans were allowed to join, and they advocated, the Knights of Labor advocated for an 8-hour workday, equal pay for women. Women's rights were important to them since they were one of the only unions that allowed women, and ending child labor. Now, they didn't really favor strikes. They favored this thing called arbitration. And what this means is having a third party available to settle their disputes. So let's say you and your best friend get in a fight. Well, if you go bring another friend into the situation to kind of help you figure out what's going on and help you settle your problem, oftentimes that's effective. And that's what the Knights of Labor preferred. The next one is the American Federation of Labor. This was in 1886. And these were specifically skilled workers. These are workers that have some type of training and skill, and they focused on some similar things: better pay, shorter working hours, better working conditions. However, they wanted to stay out of politics, and they were very fond of striking. Since they were skilled workers, they were mostly white men because those were the only workers that were really able to have the advantages of training and education during this time period. So we're going to talk about 4 violent strikes that happened as a result of these unions popping up, developing, but not all of them have directly to do with these two unions. So the first strike that we're going to talk about is the railroad strike of 1877. So the U.S. was in a recession at this time period, and the workers on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad had their wages cut 3 times. So they all walked off the job. They stood on the tracks to stop the railroads from working. They destroyed train cars. They pulled up train tracks. Over 80,000 people and 2/3 of railroad business were a part of this strike. So what happened was it got so out of control that the president actually had to send federal troops to specific places like Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and the federal troops and the strikers actually fought in literally like gunfights and battles. 100 people die, and there's $10 million in damage. Now the huge result out of this is people are shocked. They can't believe that this has happened, and they start turning away from union workers, thinking that they are only violent and that they create issues. The next thing is the Haymarket riot. This is in '86. The workers in Chicago called together a peaceful strike to try to rally for an 8-hour workday. And eventually, somewhere along the lines, police actually shoot 4 people. And this creates a huge reaction. 3,000 people show up the next day. Somebody sets off a bomb and 10 police officers are killed. More than 170 are injured. 170 people in general that were there, not only police officers. So the result of this, more violence, more bloodshed, more negativity put on unions. These unions appeared to the general public to be radical, troublemakers. So people really turn away, and the Knights of Labor are actually blamed for the bombing at the Haymarket riot. So they actually lose a lot of their membership because of this. The last two are the Homestead and Pullman strikes, also in the late 1800s and the 1890s. These are both results of a cut in wages. So the Homestead strike, wages were cut for steelworkers by 20%, and the Pullman strike was railroad workers. Their company cut their wages as well. So with the Homestead strike particularly, these people called the Pinkerton Detective Agency were called in because the union employees were locked out of their job, and so these Pinkertons came in to replace them. Now the employees start striking because they're getting replaced and their wages are cut, and eventually these Pinkertons and these strikers start fighting, shooting at each other, and again, it's very similar to what we saw in the previous 2 violent instances. Fighting lasts for days, people are hurt. Eventually, the strike is forced to stop, and the workers just lose their jobs. There's absolutely no result. And with the Pullman strike, again, there's no result. These people are forced to stop their boycotting and striking, and eventually the people just stop. They just lose their jobs. But how this was solved is the president actually hooked mail cars to the Pullman railroad cars and sent the federal troops to work it. So the president intervened here as well. So the last thing that we're going to talk about, Section 7, is American Indians and the Dawes Act. So the Dawes Act actually forced Native Americans to become farmers in the West, and it stipulated that if these Native Americans stayed on their farm for 25 years, that they could have American citizenship. And this is awfully ironic because the Native Americans were here before any settlers showed up. So this is kind of a slap in the face to the Native American population, and also really difficult for these people because they weren't traditionally farmers in their culture, so many of them were not able to be successful, and the amount of land that they were given to farm on oftentimes wasn't profitable for them. So this is this policy of assimilation, and assimilation is an important word that you should know. And this means to absorb a group of people into a new culture. So to absorb these Native Americans into this American culture, but then those Native Americans are forced to kind of give up their culture and their ways of living. Native Americans were forced to attend boarding schools. You can see here, this is a picture of one specific Tom Torlino. His name wasn't originally Tom. He was a student at the Carlisle Indian School, and you can see his before picture and then afterwards, after this assimilation school. And a lot of times in these schools, the Indians were treated really badly and forced to kind of leave all of their heritage and culture behind and become more American. So that is it. You've finished all of your lecture videos on the Industrial Revolution. Woo! So you should answer the prompts on your guided notes and get a stamp from me when you're done. Bye.